And it's really interesting. You got 80 million bucks, but you didn't think about that. Welcome back. Welcome back to my corner of the internet. And today we're going to learn why I was right about something that I've said for a very long time, which is rich people don't actually know anything about money. They don't automatically know things about money because they have it. They're just rich. It doesn't make you smarter. It doesn't make you better. It doesn't make you more informed about how to deal with your money. It simply means you have a lot of it, which means that for the average person, an average person who gets money, it just gives you more capacity to, royally screw it up. Is that too harsh? I don't know. It's a little sad, actually. I will say it's a little sad. You can figure out when rich people don't know what they're doing with their money basically only after they die. It's true. Okay. You get all these cases all the time in the news where typically famous people die with some money, and then you figure out, oh, this is how much money they had and this is what they wanted to do with it. Now, most of the time, admittedly, that never really makes it out into the universe, the sphere of general knowledge, because they plan, they put things in trusts, they put things in little boxes that nobody else can see. But every once in a while, you get a good one. Every once in a while, the lid gets ripped off and you can actually look inside. There's a bunch of notable cases that have happened over the years. Like Prince was a pretty big one. He died without a will. You know what happens when you die without a will? The state gets to direct your money. Kind of interesting, right? But we have an active case right now that is a little more involved than some of the other cases because they tried to do it right, but they didn't. That's the problem with trying to plan for your estate. Is it's kind of hard to plan for all the possible scenarios, and the one that you don't plan for is the one that actually happens, and when you're dead, you can't really do anything about it. Now we get to discover what happened. Okay, here we go. What was it, like a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago? Gene Hackman died. Famous actor. Had an estate worth like $80 million. Okay? And this dude, he was 95. Okay. So he had a good run. His wife was 30 years younger than him. She was 65. And, they moved out to the country, Santa Fe, New Mexico. Bought a house in the 80s, built it up, and kind of just escaped. They were like, I don't really want to deal with the limelight. I'm going to go build this compound, chill out. Okay. Like if you actually go on the internet, you can't really get like any recent pictures of this place, which apparently was like a pad, because they said, I don't want to be famous anymore. I don't want anybody to know anything about anything because I'm just going to go to Santa Fe, New Mexico. If you've ever been out there, beautiful country, but not a whole lot happening. Okay. And chill. That's what they thought. So what happened? Here's what happened. First off, if you haven't heard this story, this will be a good time to get educated about what happened, because you have seen maybe, a month ago, the middle of February, there's breaking news. Gene Hackman and his wife and a dog found dead in a house. The initial report was no foul play suspected. Of course, when they immediately say that, what happens? Everybody freaks out and they say, well, something must have happened. That's just weird. Weird things don't just happen by happenstance. Something fishy must have been going on. And then they kind of figured out that didn't really happen because he was 95 and he had Alzheimer's. He's been around somebody who has Alzheimer's. He had 24-hour care. Now, he was in a position where his wife, 30 years younger, could care for him. He was 95. She was 65. She was his 24-hour caretaker. Okay. They didn't have people coming to the house. It was just her taking care of him. The problem the thing that kind of unwound this whole thing is that she got sick. She got sick by this disease called the hantavirus. I guess you get it from infected rat droppings. Anyway, somehow she got sick. People don't really get this disease anymore. I'm not even going to speculate what happened. She got sick and she died. Okay. And so she died, and they can basically trace when she died down to this date. I think it was like February 11th, because they can kind of look at her phone and say, okay, there was no more activity. She was probably dead at this time. Well, he had Alzheimer's, right? So he was just wandering around the house for another week. And they can pretty much tell that he lived for another week because he had a pacemaker. Now, mind you, nobody called, nobody went to the house because they didn't have anybody else helping them. So it took them a few days to actually find him. So when authorities get there, they look at it and they go, oh, 2 people dead and a dog's dead. That's what they saw. Now, they figured it all out behind the scenes after the fact. And they pretty much figured out, okay, that was probably the timeline. She died. 1 week later, he died. Here is where it gets kind of interesting, because he had all this money. He had $80 million in a trust. Okay. What is a trust? A trust is just a box. Trust is a box that you can put things in. Now, it doesn't really specify what was in this trust, but let's just pretend like this was a trust that had a checking account with $80 million. It's probably not true, but for the sake of example, we'll say it is. So they're speculating there's $80 million in this trust. And what they are saying is that the trust was something that he created, that he was the trustee of. He directed this money. He can make decisions on this money while he was alive. Now, first off, let me stop right here. If you have Alzheimer's and you have somebody who is caring for you 24/7, is it in your own best interest for you to be making financial decisions for yourself at that point? We can look back, because this has now become public record. We can look back and we can say that his estate documents had not been updated since 2005. That was 20 years ago. So his estate documents are 20 years old, which, by the way, this is all from the internet. You can find all this stuff. By the way, at that point in time, he had been estranged from his adult children who are now in their 50s and 60s. Okay. He has 20-year-old estate documents which say that he's the trustee of his trust. He can direct his own money. He can make his own decisions. And at that time, his wife was named his successor trustee. So what does that mean? If he goes, which is what he expected, by the way, right? He's 30 years older than her. He was drafting these documents. He was 75 years old. She was 45. So any common sense person would say, yeah, the logical outcome here is that I'm going to go before she does. And in that case, she's going to become the successor trustee of my trust. So the trust is a box. The trustee gets to make decisions with what happens in the money in that box. So it was written that if he goes, she's now in charge of the box of money. Okay? Not that complicated, actually, and pretty much standard. The problem is they kind of forgot to do, I'm going to say 2 or 3 things. The first thing is they didn't account for what happens if he was not in a state to make financial decisions for himself. He was still the trustee on this trust when he died. Okay? Now, whether he was actually making the decisions on his own money in practice at that age, with that mental state, who knows? But the reality is, when you die and your estate has to be settled, which means you take all of your money and it gets distributed. Okay. When you die and your estate has to be settled, there is no interpretation. There is no, well, I meant to say this. No, you were just dead. And the documents just say whatever they say. So the documents said she's going to be the successor trustee. Let's go back to our timeline. She died. We can basically tell this at this point. She died a week before he did. He was still alive for a period of time. His trust said that she was going to be his successor trustee. Well, she doesn't exist anymore. So what happens then? Because the money can't go to her. You cannot leave your money to a dead person. That's tried and true. So what happens? Well, if you look at New Mexico estate settlement laws, it would say that if you died within 120 hours of each other, what's 120 hours? Like 5 days. 5 days of each other. It's considered to be a simultaneous death, and your estates would be settled as such. They did not die within 5 days of each other. That's why the 7-day thing is really important. February 11th, February 18th. They died 7 days apart. So he can't leave his money to her as a dead person. If they had died together, it'd be a different story. The money could have been settled, I guess, through her. I don't even know. I'm not an estate attorney. Don't ask me hard questions. I'm just telling you what's going to happen. She went. There was not a second level of successor trustee. In other words, she was named as the successor trustee, and there was not any planning done around what happens if she goes before he does. Mind you, long before this, if I was writing this, not that I'm an attorney, if I was giving them advice, which I can't do because I'm not an attorney, but if I was, I would have said, hey, shouldn't you have some sort of clause in there where you should name another trustee when you're not mentally fit to be able to make decisions for yourself financially? Maybe that could have been a solve. Also, mind you, if you read the internet, it says his kids who were estranged like 25 years ago, 20 years ago, it says that they had reconciled in the last 2 years. Was that reflected in his documents? I don't know. And mind you, the only reason this information is now public is because she was named as the successor trustee and there was no other trustee after her. So what happens when there's a scenario in a estate settlement when it's not accounted for in the documents? It goes to the state. The state gets to settle your estate. Say that 5 times fast. New Mexico gets to decide what to do with his money. And guess what? That is a public process. So that's why we get to read these documents, boys and girls. Isn't it fun? Here's the other thing. She had a trust. Okay. And this is where the contention is going to come in, because they're trying to decide, did they die within 5 days of each other, which I think it's pretty cut and dry. I mean, I'm not a forensic Scientologist or whatever. Is that a thing? Forensic Scientology? Forensic accountant. This is some forensic accounting, I think. Maybe. Whatever. If they died within 5 days of each other, this would be a different way to handle this case. They're trying to figure out if they did or not. I don't think they did. I mean, it seems pretty cut and dry that they didn't. But if they did, her estate plan was that all of her money would be sent to charity. So it kind of matters if the money goes from him to her through her estate plan, because all of her estate plan would have sent it to charity. Or if it stays through his lineage, if he owns the money when he died rather than her dying before him, which I don't think is the case, then it goes through the state law. The state law probably says, every state's different because I didn't do my research, but the state law probably would say this money would go to his next living descendants, which would be his 3 kids. And it's really interesting. You got $80 million, but you didn't think about that. It's sad, actually. I kind of feel bad. I'm not going to lie. Can you imagine being in your 60s or 50s, famous Hollywood actor dad, and you kind of don't really know what's going to happen with your inheritance or if you're getting one at all? Maybe it was a discussion they had. I don't know. I don't know what those discussions were like or if they were not had. But can you imagine not having those discussions and going, yeah, I'm pretty sure dad has money. I have no idea who's getting it. Maybe stepmom's going to get it, and maybe we'll get some if that happens. But now this is a public process. Are you kidding? That's crazy to me. It just like makes me think, just because you have money doesn't automatically mean you know what to do with it. Like, everybody's good at different things. Okay. And some people who are good at accumulating money also happen to be good at like dealing with it. There was a story the other day. Every time I hear a story like this, like these all things, they kind of just run together in my mind. There's a story the other day where Rory McIlroy, big time golfer, was at a golf tournament. This golf tournament was in Florida, and he lives in Florida. So this tournament was like, I don't know, call it an hour and a half away from his house. And between the third and fourth rounds, he said, I don't like these clubs that I brought with me. I need to go get new ones. Do you think he drove 3 hours to go get new ones? Of course not. No, somebody on his team apparently booked an Uber to go from his house, pick up these clubs, drive him 90 minutes, and drop him off at his hotel. And he was asked about this in an interview. And they were like, yeah, I heard you got an Uber for your clubs. You know how much it was? And he goes, yeah, I don't know, not my department. Which is always kind of a funny answer to me, because you sure as heck better have somebody who's pretty competent running that department if you don't know how much you spent on something. Mind you, it came out later that his Uber was $695 plus a $300 tip. So he spent $1,000 on an Uber. He didn't know about it. I mean, I'm sure he could have figured it out. And I can understand this, right? Because this dude's an independent contractor. He's playing for big money on the PGA Tour, right? He's running a business. That's how you have to think about yourself as an independent contractor. He's got somebody else in charge of that department. Sure, it makes sense. But you sure as heck better make sure you got somebody who knows what they're doing running that place. Okay? And if you don't, this is the risk. This is why there are so many really smart, capable business people who don't ever want to scale, who figure out how to run a 1 or a 2 person shop doing something. Maybe they got revenue of, $500,000, $1 million, $2 million, and they know that they have the talent to be able to take it to the next level, whatever that is, $5 million, $10 million, $100 million in revenue. But in order to scale, they have to hire people, and you got to trust those people. And the more people you have, the more capacity for things to go wrong. And some people who are really smart and self-aware say, you know what? I think I'd rather not. I think I'm just going to be content with managing my own 500 million, $2 million in revenue and my own solopreneur business deal. Because I don't trust other people to deal with that revenue. And you know what? I kind of get it. I kind of get it. Like, it's a heck of a lot easier to make a comfortable amount of money solving a comfortable set of problems and like controlling your entire universe. That's not somebody like, I don't know, Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. I mean, these dudes said, no, we're going to take this thing to the moon. And when you scale much beyond that, when you scale beyond the job that one person can do, you're just accepting the risk that stuff's just going to go wrong. Like, if you look at Walmart, they've got like a 2 or 3% allowance for shrink. You know what shrink is? Stuff that goes missing. How does it go missing? I don't know. Fraud, theft, some combination of that. And you go, oh, 2 or 3%, that's not very much. Well, sure, it's not very much, but 2 or 3% of $500 billion, that's a lot. That's $1 billion, $2 billion of stuff that just goes missing. But it's not even worth it to them to go track that down. I mean, I don't know how many TVs you have to steal $1 billion worth of electronics or scooters or whatever. Mangoes. It's a lot of mangoes. They don't care. Because to get to that level, you just got to be like, all right, stuff's going to go wrong. And there's so many people who just don't want to deal with something like this Gene Hackman case, right? Don't want to deal with the fact that eventually you're going to die and it's all going to get flowed right back through your estate. and you are responsible for it. Is just the reality. I mean, sorry, you just can't really outsource like your estate settlement. Nobody knows when you're going to die. And if you don't have these conversations, you don't think about it, stuff like this happens. You know, even if the tables had been turned here. Okay. And he died first. She got all the money. Well, her estate plan said that when she dies, her money was going to go to charity. Well, the reality is she's 65, right? She probably could have lived another 20 years had a freak accident like this not happened. Do you think his kids felt like they had the right to some of that money? Maybe. I don't know. They didn't call me. But do you think they even knew that her estate plan was to send all of this money to charity? Do you think she knew that? Do you think she thought about that? Do you think that's what they wanted to do? I have no clue. But if it's true that their documents were updated 20 years ago, shoot, do you think that the charities they named are even still in business? Can you be in business as a charity, or are you just operating? It's not business, right? I don't know. Ask ChatGPT. It's just an interesting thought. Stuff doesn't just happen automatically, like correctly. Like there's this weird thing that we have on our brain that's like, oh, rich, famous people, they must have a different type of checking account, or they must have a different type of like magic wand that makes everything like get paid for automatically. And that is not the case. That is not the case. They have to use the same things you and I do. They got to fill out the same paperwork. It's going to get, settled through the same courts, the same systems that you and I are going to. There is no free lunch. It's a fascinating case to me. I don't know why I got on this today, but I did. It makes you think nobody's going to be ready to die, and then you're going to die, and then it's all going to get settled somehow. Whatever the heck you got written down is literally what's going to happen. That's it. They don't get to interpret. So now we get to see how this plays out because it's public, which is kind of interesting. I'm kind of in shock sometimes at the level of journalism that some random person went to like the New Mexico State probate court estate settlement place and said, that's interesting, and pulled all these documents. It's kind of a weird job, but here I am talking about it. So whatever. Am I weird, or are you weird for listening to this? Maybe. Who knows? But think about that. Think about that today. How about that to chew on? All right. Well, have fun this week and next week, and we'll see you at the next one.